Good morning, guys. This is Sanat Bhardwaj bringing to you the next video session on Mission Mains 2023. Now, in this session, we are going to take forward our efforts where we have been discussing a number of current affairs with respect to mains for this year. Now, if you have been following our series, Anshum sir and me, we have been working on a number of things. Now, as far as our approach is concerned, if you remember, we have been focusing on a number of aspects. We have focused on the syllabus, and on the basis of that syllabus, we have started our journey towards becoming wiser. Now, I had written a quote a couple of years ago, and I had written down that by knowledge we approach God. But in the true sense, when you come to UPSC Civil Services examination, what we realize is that it is not just knowledge, it is actually wisdom that helps you crack this exam. So you'll have to be wiser than you already were. On that thought, what we have come to realize is that this exam is asking you to be more, to be better than you already are. So make sure that when you are covering the approach, when you are focusing on UPSC mains examination, you focus on a lot of things that make you wiser than you already are. So we will be focusing on all of those aspects here as well. If you focus, and before we go on, just a brief introduction about myself, my name, my qualifications, my years of experience, and the kind of subjects that I handle. These are the qualifications, years of experience, the subjects that I've handled. Now, when we start on certain broad areas of coverage. Now, these broad areas of coverage per se are focused entirely on the syllabus. We have started off with economy, and today as well, we will be moving towards more areas and more sectors of economy. So, I've brought for you guys important reports and important lessons from the data that will be relevant for your mains examination. एक चीज का ख्याल रखिएगा, IBC, introduction, body, and conclusion. If you follow this chart, if you follow this process, then you will never fail to write good answers in your mains examination. Introduction, body, and conclusion. So, what we are going to do, we are going to use these reports, this data to strengthen your introduction, to embolden your body, and also to make sure that you are wise enough to write good conclusions. So, without any further ado, let's begin with the concepts. This is just the syllabus that I have mentioned here. You can always follow the syllabus and check what are the topics that we are covering. Right now, if I were to tell you, I am focusing on the different aspects of various sectors of Indian economy. All right. Chalo. Now, let's first talk about the road to smart and precise agriculture. Road to smart and precise agriculture. Now, if this topic was to be understood, this is supposed to be understood in the manner that for every UPSC aspirant has to understand agriculture. You will have to start from the very basics. Realize that from Mesolithic age, where the crudest form of agriculture as a mere activity, not an economic activity, not a social activity, but as a mere activity had begun. And then in the Neolithic age, it started to gain prominence. On that basis, on that ground, we will have to realize the repercussions and also the importance and evolution of agriculture. So, road to smart and precise agriculture. There was a report in only recently based on this, and we are going to understand how we can utilize it for your mains examination. The Green Revolution, we are seeking the second version now. It had started off in late 1960s. It certainly made domestic food production a common talk of the town. It certainly helped us grow And from being a food deficit nation with vast tracts of alluvial soils, we still were food deficit in the beginning part of our independent history. But we then became a food surplus nation, and not just a food surplus nation, an export oriented country. So much so that we could again move to the prime moving force of our Indian economy became agriculture again, and it truly helped us in that sense. India has 70% rural households still dependent on primary forms of agriculture and still dependent primarily on agriculture. Today, India is facing the second generation problems. We are the problems that we are facing is based on sustainability, nutrition, adoption of new agricultural technologies, income levels of the population depending on farming. They are still not growing. They are still not growing. And on those grounds, what we have come to realize is that this is going to be a challenge for a country like India. All right. Just could you just give me a couple of seconds? Just a second. Wonderful. Stretch it out a little that it is easily visible to all. I hope it is visible to everyone. Now तो it would be, है ना? चलो. I really like symmetry in life. So for that reason, I, even if it takes a couple of seconds, you should make sure that the start and the pursuance of your activities should be in line. You should never leave out your character, your perspective in life out of your persona whenever you're pursuing any activity. So that is what I did. Now, so road to smart and precise agriculture. You will have to understand the significance of agriculture for Indian economy, because when you study agriculture, when you realize the India's agriculture is a very wide variety of activities, allied activities. It includes your contract farming, from contract farming towards dry land farming, rooftop farming today, aquaculture or mariculture, for example. And then you move on towards fisheries, you move on towards allied activities, your poultry farming, your cattle rearing, every aspect associated with agriculture. Although it is also said that agriculture today is the prime source of greenhouse gases. That is also something that we will be discussing, given that sustainability is talk of the town. Now, food security and induced growth of industrial sector, it is based on agricultural production, because agriculture is the primary sector of the economy. Agriculture supplies the raw material to various agro-based industries like sugar, jute, cotton, textiles, vanaspati industries, food processing industries. Today we are moving towards becoming the major player in fish exports or fishery exports. That is only because our specific focus on the allied sector. Now, in case of fisheries, we have the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. This scheme has really uplifted the fishery sector. The fishery sector is the leading sector within the agriculture component of India's economy. It is the leading sector today because of the same reason. After the Green Revolution, the purchasing power of large land holding farmers had increased because of the enhanced income that they had generated. But the problem still lies with those farmers who are not yet a part of large land holdings. In fact, the basic problem with the Indian agriculture is one of the problems, of course, is your fragmentation of land. So, land fragmentation is such. I hope that you remember in my previous sessions, I had explained this to you that land fragmentation is such that you have marginal farmers, then you have small farmers, and then you have medium land holding farmers, and finally you have large land holding farmers. Now, marginal farmers 0 to 1 hectares, 1 to 2 hectares, 2 to 10 hectares, greater than 10 hectares. This is the land holding size that generally they have. This is the data that you have to know. You should know. Not just the fact that we have small marginal landholding farmers to the tune of around 74 to 80% in this country, and land fragmentation is a major problem in the agriculture sector. Along with that, the land ownership problems, which leads to a lot of court cases, which also downgrades the productivity of the farmers. That also is a major problem with respect to the agricultural sector. Apart from that, the 0 to 1 hectares is not actually 1 hectares. The average land holding within the marginal segment of farmers, the marginal land holding segment of farmers, it is close to 0.4, which means it is below the half, below the median, which means the average is less. That means more farmers are close to very less land holding, which also creates problems with respect to all the farmers gaining prominence or all the farmers getting a basic 2 square meal a day. And over top of that, around 12 to 18% of interest from the informal banking that they pursue, because formalization of these farmers is still a distant dream. These farmers, they tend to gain capital only and only from informal sectors, from the adatiyas, from ankadiyas, from different different money lenders who charge exorbitant rates from these individuals, because they are giving them loans on either secured basis or unsecured basis. Secured basis most of the times because their own land is kept as a mortgage with these money lenders, or sometimes they have to get unsecured loans on the basis of the goodwill. Now, there are good money lenders, but because the market rate for the informal banking itself is close to 12 to 15 to 18%, it goes up to 18%. Sometimes it is as low as 12%, not below this. Whereas if you talk about the formal sector, it is around 8. And that tells you the difference that there is in the percentages. Just a second, guys. Let me sort out your chat section. If I'm audible and visible, could you let me know in the chat section, please? I'm audible and visible. Could you let me know in the chat section? Now, moving further, sources of government revenue. Now, agriculture is one of the major sources of government revenue. It is also contributing towards international trade, but still, facing certain challenges. So, what are the current challenges of India's agriculture sector? The first and foremost, just a second. Now, the first and foremost thing that they are facing, and which even Jaggi Vasudev ji, he's also picked up this topic of soil health, of land degradation. And soil health was actually targeted through the soil health card scheme. It is a wonderful scheme. I actually in awe of this scheme, soil health card scheme. Now, the soil health card scheme allows you to measure the macro micronutrients in the soil. It helps you realize what all is there present in the soil and what you have to add over top of it. It removes that problem of overutilization of various nutrients, overutilization of various fertilizers, which otherwise through leaching processes was also degrading the health of water bodies around these farms. That is why we have to make sure that the health of the soil is maintained. Now, due to wind and water erosion, due to deforestation, urbanization, removal of natural vegetation as well, it has reduced, or rather converting forests into farms, it has reduced or degraded the health of the soil to a major extent. Today, the soil health card scheme has allowed you to realize what is the level of soil organic carbon, which is SOC across India. It is an important indicator that we use to understand the health of soil. And on that basis, the kind of nutrients, micro as well as macronutrients required by the plants or by the crops, that is ascertained. And on that basis, the fertilizers are to be, the amount of fertilizers and the kind of fertilizers are to be ascertained. Now, it would be the futuristic aspect, would be the thing that you should write in the conclusion part or in the suggestions component of your answer. You should write down the fact that you can, to promote soil health, you can do one thing. What is that? What if I start linking the subsidy for fertilizers with the amount of fertilizer that is needed on the basis of this soil health card scheme? If the farmer is to be told by the in by the government itself, or by, say, through extension services, by various agricultural universities, by various universities who study the soil health cards, and they tell the farmer that this much is to be required, and on that basis these individual farmers, they get subsidy. Now, if the subsidy is regulated, I'm not saying reduced, but regulated on the basis of the amount of fertilizer. We are right now working on that. We are working on the amount of fertilizer. We are working on the amount and the percentages of fertilizer that is required. We are trying to reform the subsidy in the fertilizer segment. But then, if we were to regulate it on the basis of soil health card scheme, imagine the amount of money that the government will save. Imagine the amount of fertilizers, extra fertilizers that the farmers, that they were otherwise adding, and reducing their output input ratio, and also making sure that more and more out of pocket expenditure was happening from the farmers. So reducing that as well to a certain level has helped and will be helping the farmers to make sure that their income is sustained, number one, to make sure that the fertilizers that they're using are in sync with what is required as well. It is not just like from DDLJ, just like Simran's father was doing. Ow, ow. There can be a regulation of those things, right? Now, shrinking farm size is another problem that we are facing. For this, there are multi-pronged responses that the government has brought up. For example, one program that they are running is digitization of land records, and digitization of land records has also led to one debate, and that debate is between two things. Number one, conclusive titling, and presumptive titling. I hope you remember in the last class I had talked about these two titlings. Now, these titles, conclusive title and presumptive titles, they seem to be the same, but actually they are quite different. How? Let's understand. So, for presumptive title, this is actually what is happening in a regular course of action. Almost everywhere in this country, you have presumptive titles. In presumptive titles, the registering authority, the registrar or the tehsildar, or someone who is assigned with the duty of registering the land records, that person, that authority, that only presumes that on the basis of the instrument, on the basis of the document that comes in front of them, I am presuming that X person is the owner. There is a presumption there on the basis of the authenticity of that instrument. That instrument might be an agreement to sell, that instrument might be a lease deed, might be anything associated to it, might be a sale deed, multiple instruments for the basis of transfer of property. Further, this is not a conclusive proof of ownership. To be owner, you have to ensure that you purchased the property from the owner itself. So there must be no fraud in that sense. And that is why presumptive titles are based on the presumption that X was actually the owner and then he sold the property to Y. In conclusive titling, you do not have to, because this concept of titling also leads to problems with respect to the farmers actually getting loans as well. Because when you are going to pursue loans which are secured, generally the loans are secured. Secured means they have some form of mortgage, some form of security lined up behind them. So that just in case the loans are not repaid, the security can be diluted, the security can be sold off, and loan can be recovered, or the loan amount or the principal amount at least can be recovered. Now, since these loans are to be secured, the farmer has to prove its title. The farmer has to prove the title on the basis of, there is a concept of fard. The concept comes from Mughal era, and even before that there was a different name, but right now fard is the word that is used. Further, further. The concept of fard and the document of fard, the details of previous owners has to be gained, has to be taken from the land records authority, and that is to be provided to the banks. Now the banks scrutinize those records and then give you the loan. That is what is happening in most of the cases. It reduces, it not just, it rather enhances the time that you guys have. It enhances the time that a farmer has to wait for getting that capital, which is very crucial for the farmer. Number one. Number two, at times it is more or less a harassment at the end of the banking sector towards the farmer. To avoid that, the government is pushing efforts towards conclusive titling, which is going to help the farmers as well as other individuals. It is also going to reduce the burden of, you know, the entire set of workload that there is in high courts, in supreme courts, in various district courts, where more and more people come to fight a case, to file a suit for this problem of title. Conclusive titling will help you reduce that burden. Conclusive titling will also ensure that the farmers get their share. Very recently, Haryana government came up with a scheme to remove certain problems. Now, there is something called Lal Dora, the red line. Red line or the Lal Dora is basically a concept that was used by various colonialists to make sure that there was a piece of land or a chunk of land that nobody had rights over. This is sometimes called Shamalot or Shamlat. In Hindi, Shamlat, Lal Dora is quite similar. The concepts are quite similar. Am I not audible? Please check again. Please check again, guys. Now, so the concept of Lal Dora or red line has been targeted in Haryana. And very recently, they have come up with this scheme where they are removing the problems of Lal Dora, they are removing the problems of red line, and they are handing out the land to the people, the rightful owners of that land. Because if the land that you own, if it comes within the domain of that Lal Dora, then it is a community land. It is a village common land. What is it? It is a village common land. This village common lands concept seems to be a very good concept up till the point that you think that there should be community building and community ownership of land. But right now, because of fragmentation, because of problems associated with farm size, land titling, village common lands generally tend to undermine the process of property transfer, which when the farmer wants to sell off the land to the fellow farmer or to move to a bigger land, if that land comes within the Lal Dora, which farmers generally have lesser knowledge about, then they can be exploited at various ends, they can be defrauded, and to avoid that, the Haryana government started off with this Lal Dora Zameen concept and the process. Now, based on that, once you realize this means that the problem of farm size is not just the problem of hereditary processes. We think that one father has multiple kids, the land is to be fragmented. Yes, that is fine. That is a basic root of the problem. But there are also certain peripheral aspects associated with the land concept of agriculture. Further, we have to realize, we have to make sure that the farm size of majority of the rural households, since it has declined, we have to make sure that there are prospects like the contract farming that are promoted. Now, if you go for contract farming, there is a basic need. What is that basic need? Do you know that? The basic need is you'll have to enhance your productivity. To enhance your productivity, the farmers go for FPOs, farmer producer organizations, they go for associations, they go for agglomerations, they try to come together and follow cooperative farming. The best or the most productive and efficient example being Amul, cooperative farming. Further, we at national level, only 52% of India's gross cropped area is under irrigation coverage. Tell me in the chat section, and if you're watching this session in the recorded format, tell me in the comment section what is the meaning of gross cropped area. You should know this. Despite significant strides since independence, we are still monsoon dependent. Still, we are not able to reach out to maximum masses for irrigation. Now, there are two aspects associated with it. One is adaptation, the other one is mitigation. I will talk about both the aspects with respect to the concept where you lack water supply, you lack irrigation, and you are monsoon dependent. The Indian agriculture is monsoon dependent. Adaptation, what you can do, you can go for dry land farming. Dryland farming or dryland agriculture are basically certain organic or natural processes or natural tools and techniques that you can deploy in areas which are semi-arid or which get rainfalls very less, or while you have no rainfall, while you have a strong or a very big patch of no rainfall at all, then dryland farming can also be pursued. So dryland farming is the answer as an adaptive process towards more cropping or increasing productivity. Second thing, the mitigation aspect can be coming from the schemes like AIBP. From 96, 97, this has been the talk of the town. Today, it has become a part of the major scheme called Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. This component has to be worked upon in a greater sense. We will have to start micro irrigation projects. We will have to pursue. There was very recently certain technologies which have come up. And if you are an avid follower of social media, then you would know this as well. There is something called mist irrigation. Now, mist irrigation technologies, indigenous mist irrigation technologies are taking Indian farming to places. Number one, it reduces the temperature around the crop. Number one. Number two, it helps you enhance the efficiency in mulching. It helps you cool down the entire areas where you keep your cattle, and also helps you ensure per drop more crop. So mist irrigation is the next talk of the town. Further, lack of convenient access to credit is also one of the problems. So convenient access to credit not just means access to credit. Convenient access means that when you are providing access to credit, it should be convenient. So the farmer does not feel being defrauded. The farmer does not feel that he is unaware about certain things. He should have full awareness and a lot of other aspects associated with the implementation of access to credit schemes that are associated with the Indian agriculture. So a convenient line of credit is not available. That is why the small and marginal farmers, they move towards the informal sector of banking. As far as the NABARD's 2018 survey is concerned, the survey says that farmers with smaller plot sizes, they took greater share of loans from the non-institutional lenders, just as I told you. That means compared to those farmers who have more than 2 hectares of land, it is less than 2 hectares, which is small and marginal farmers basically. Which are these? Less than 2 hectares of land. What are these farmers? These are small and marginal farmers. Now, small and marginal farmers are getting loans from, and this is from 2018 survey of NABARD, as recent as 2018, only 5 odd years before this session. Now, it means that what we will have to do, we will have to make sure that these farmers, these small and marginal farmers, do not rely on the expensive informal sources. What do you do about it? If you have any suggestions, you mention that in the chat section. What are the way outs to make sure that the farmers do not, at least the small and marginal farmers, they certainly should not be relying on the expensive sources, the informal sector. What do you do about it? One, you can improve the accessibility. So how do you improve the accessibility? By making sure that, number one, that the securitization of resources is easy. Simple. Number two, lack of awareness about government schemes, lack of awareness with respect to interest subvention scheme, with respect to crop insurance scheme, because crop insurance scheme is directly linked with your access to credit, and it also helps you because if you have Kisan credit cards and the linkage, that even though it is voluntary, it becomes voluntary once it becomes mandatory once. It's basically, the government's policy keeps on changing. Right now, being voluntary, the Kisan credit card linked with the weather-based crop insurance scheme and various other crop insurance schemes, which cover the pre-harvest, post-harvest aspects. and even to the extent they also cover the transportation losses, etc. Now, when you cover all these aspects of agriculture, then you realize that basically Indian agriculture, it requires money, but that money is not really something that the government is not focused on. It is majorly what the problem is. Majorly, the awareness is lacking. Number one, the accessibility, even after the awareness, is limited. And how do you change that? Once you make sure that securitization is easier. Number two, you will have to make sure that there is financial inclusion. And financial inclusion should be changing gears now. We have been focusing on financial inclusion, right? But that process seems to be quite obsolete today. Financial inclusion has to take us to the next level. How do you do that? You take banking to the mobile, or rather, you make sure that the banking happens right at the doorstep. Unless and until you start doing that, unless and until the farmers get used to the process of banking, particularly the small and marginal farmers. When you imagine farmers, do not imagine farmers from Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, those areas where you see farmers creating, big houses, sending their kids to learn from foreign universities, Western universities, pursuing various courses, having businesses abroad and everything. Not those large land holding farmers. I'm talking about that farmer who is probably sitting in Chhattisgarh, probably sitting in Jharkhand, probably sitting in the drier parts of Karnataka, of Maharashtra, for example, and those Deccan areas where you have dry land farming being pursued, those patchy areas, patchy land where the farmer is sitting, the farmer who seemingly is poor, the small and marginal landholding farmer. Do not, do not ever confuse yourself. And you see, if you see Punjabi movies, the Punjabi culture, for example, or Haryanvi culture and processes, the large land holding farmers, they possess Audis, they possess BMWs, Land Cruisers, and multiple cars and big houses. They have gained prominence and significance for two major reasons. Number one reason being the Green Revolution. Number two reason being the fact that, of course, they went abroad and everything happened. But the number two reason for them getting prominence is because of the development that ensued the first Green Revolution. It allowed them to sell off their land, the agricultural land, to the government at higher rates. And these individuals, predominantly the northern and the northwestern part of the country, they predominantly are at least medium or large landholding farmers. For that reason, there is going to be a discrepancy in analysis. So do not analyze them. Analyze individuals from Madhya Pradesh, from Jharkhand, from Chhattisgarh, from Odisha, from West Bengal, even, and to a certain extent to the southern parts of the country as well. Now, crop intensity is another aspect that you'll have to take into account while focusing on smart and precise agriculture. Rapid commercialization of Indian agriculture is happening. Most of the farmers, still, although it is happening, they are still, especially small and marginal farmers, they tend to place cereals at the center of their cropping system. So even today, you have farmers focusing on cereals at the center, which means that you have a food crop, and basically if you focus on all the seasons, Zaid, Rabi, Kharif, Rabi, Zaid, and basically the seasonal variations, in the middle, in the middle of wheat and rice, you are planting cereals basically, and you are planting pulses, for example. So this is a very primitive system of cropping. This cropping system has to be diversified. So crop diversification is needed in this segment that we will have to work upon further, because the Indian farming, even today, if you have noticed very recently, I think only a week from today, there was a problem where the farmers were again protesting. Many students, they don't know that even the states provide you with MSPs. These MSPs that the state provide, they have a slight variations. In certain states, they are called as SMPs. Now, these SMPs or MSP of the state, which is provided, they were asking for enhancing or increasing that MSP. Basically, that was the case. But not to focus on that, because that is a part of another aspect of agriculture. I think we have covered that as well in the previous class. We will be focusing on it in the next class as well. But abhi filhal, let's focus on this part. Crop diversification. How much, to what extent are we focusing on mixed cropping? Are we focusing on alley cropping? Are we focusing on, you know, uh, multi-cropping, for example? These different cropping systems that we can deploy, we are not yet working on that. All right. Now, before I proceed further and talk about ineffective, percolation of policies, I want to share a very, if you give me a couple of seconds, I want to share a very important aspect, and that is with respect to Mission 2024. Mission 1 year with Sriram IAS for UPSC CSE 2024 is right there. Make sure that you follow this, because this mission we are going to be covering comprehensively the entire aspects of the exam, the prelims, the mains, and the interviews. Apart from that, we will also make sure that you guys have access to at least 25% discount. But if you use this referral code, you can get the discount, which is SRIRAMS. Further, if you want to avail any of the courses for optional subject, I am pursuing public administration on the Unacademy platform. You have access to sociology, public administration, ESIR optional, economics optional, history optional, and of course the GS Foundation batch as well. So mission 1 year for UPSC CSE. Make sure to be a part of this. All right. So now let's move back. Ineffective percolation of policies. So the policies with respect to land leasing laws, with respect to tenancy laws, they are created, but they basically, the laws themselves, they are discouraging the formal leasing contracts between the owner and tenants. A large number of unofficial tenancies exist in the country. Lack of identification of tenants, which leads to the intended benefits that are supposed to reach these tenant farmers. They, for example, the disaster relief, the direct benefit transfers, they are at risk of being not being distributed, or they get distributed to the landowner rather than the farmer or the tenant farmer. That creates a problem. And whosoever is the cultivator of that land on official records, he gets the benefits. That is why the problem arises. Now, just a second, guys. Just give me a second. So, you will have to work on efficient percolation of policies. Efficient percolation of policies also ensures another aspect, and that is related to administration. If you are a public administration student, then you will have to focus on all the techniques and tools that you have learned in the syllabus of public administration. If you have been attending my sessions, then you certainly would know I have delivered a session on the 13th report of Second Administrative Reforms Commission, second ARC, 13th report. And there are around 3 to 4 odd sessions on the 13th report. Just go and watch those sessions on Unacademy platform. My name is Sanat Dutt Bhardwaj. You can find my name on Unacademy UPSC CSE goals and also in the optional goals. And when you do, make sure to follow me on Unacademy. Also, make sure to go through the constitutionalism, second ARC reports, and various other current affairs associated with public administration, particularly. Now, if you are a public administration student, I would recommend that you do not you should use these examples in your PubAd optional, but do not use public administration into general studies. This is GS3. Let it remain as such. All right. Further. So, what are the recent government initiatives for the development of the agriculture sector? You have the ENAM portal, which is still, it is a half-hearted implementation of ENAM portal. It has not yet been universalized. More and more money is being infused in it, but still requires more and more efforts with respect to ENAM portal. Why? Because the integration of ENAM portal with the day-to-day activities of farmer, that has not yet happened. Pradhan Mantri Krishi Vikas Yojana, wonderful scheme on the paper, but the implementation itself has certain challenges. For example, the AIBP is still slagging, it is still not working well. Then my Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, the extent of coverage in this scheme is a problem. Further, dispersal of all funds and money that is to be paid to the farmer is very sluggish. Micro irrigation fund and various other funds along with micro irrigation fund, the agri stack portal, it again, all these developments that can enhance precision. If you notice, the question was with respect to precision farming or precision, ensuring precision in agriculture. You will have to focus on the keywords, guys. The question that we had picked up was not just smart agriculture, not just sustainable agriculture, but precision based agriculture or precision in agriculture. So you'll have to focus on all these things. जैसा क्वेश्चन वैसा आंसर, एक हिंदी की कहावत है, जैसा मुंह वैसा थप्पड़। तो जैसा क्वेश्चन वैसा आंसर होना चाहिए। सो क्वेश्चन को, इफ यू आर फ्रॉम हिंदी बैकग्राउंड, और इफ यू आर हिंदी स्पीकिंग इंडिविजुअल, और इफ यू आर फ्रॉम से फॉर एग्जांपल तमिल, तेलुगु, कन्नड़, Malayalam background, any background that you're from, I would recommend that you, if you have access to the translated version, use that translated version right now from the previous year question papers to realize how UPSC is creating those questions and what is it actually asking. Use your own languages, your own mediums of instructions, your own local languages that you follow. Hindi, be it Bhojpuri or Bengali or Marathi or whatever language that you're following, use your language to understand the meaning of the question, because many times, and you'll have to do it now, not in the exam. In the exam, you have to be adept, you have to know everything about it. So make sure that you practice through this process. I have seen many of my students qualifying the mains because they got to know what to write accurately, and they could follow and focus their energies only on that. Let's move forward based on that. I hope you have gotten the idea. So, what should be the way forward? Let's understand that as well. As far as the way forward is concerned, guys, you can also mention your questions and queries with respect to the topic and otherwise as well in the chat section and also in the comment section after the session ends. I will make sure that all your queries are answered. Now, what should be the way forward? Blending the traditional practices, just as I told you, rainwater harvesting, etc. All this is basically a part of dryland farming processes. So if you are pursuing dryland farming, then certainly rainwater harvesting will be one of the parts. Recycling of organic waste, plant nutrients, pest management. Very recently, the government in various urban areas has picked up on a practice of picking garbage similar to what Japan does. Now, in Japan, you know what happens? They segregate the waste in around 7 to 10 odd different parts. Electronic waste, plastic waste is separated from agricultural waste or organic waste. So there are multiple components of garbage that you produce in any part of the world. In various cities like Chandigarh, like Indore, like various other cities which are moving towards Swachh Bharat mission or the Swachhata, Pakvaj, and the program where they are actually ranking the cleanest cities in India, and also the smart city mission. It is in line with the solid waste management systems. So based on that, what you can do is, in the areas where farming is the predominant activity, particularly the village communities, there you can have garbage segregation plants. So segregation of garbage into, of course, biodegradable and non-biodegradable. If it happens, you can create from this organic waste a process of recycling. You can use it to create biogas. You can also compost it to create green manures. And using the latest technologies, use the research works and R&Ds of various agricultural universities of not just India but also abroad. Use those practices. I am from a farming background, and my family, the the part of the family that pursues farming, you know what they do every single day today, they use YouTube, just like you guys are using YouTube to enhance your skills for mains preparation. They are using YouTube to gain prominence and gain wisdom with respect to various practices that are happening abroad. And if they get access to quality funds, if they get access to capital, then they probably might end up using those technologies within this country to enhance productivity further. We have to bring synergistic impact. Traditional technologies should be blended with modern frontier technologies like tissue culture, genetic engineering, and various other aspects to ensure you have higher productivity. Further, you will have to go for input intensive. From input intensive, you will have to go for knowledge intensive agriculture. Diversify your farming practices, diverse points of view engaged at national level. A dialogue forum has to be created. In fact, this is something that even National Commission on Farmers had suggested. Advanced world is moving towards precision farming. We should do the same. Smart and precise move towards high tech farming in India will not just reduce the average cost. You can utilize technologies like big data, AI, GPS, remote sensing, various technologies that can be a part of the high tech. You can have a limb of ISRO taking care of purely agriculture sector. The the satellites being sent up in the space, they can entirely be focused on agriculture, for example, and not just on broad areas related to not just agriculture but also weather, etc. But you can focus on agriculture and send certain satellites, and you can have a specialized agency within the ISRO so that you enhance the use of space tech in agriculture sector. Further, you should start investing in R&D, which is not readily happening right now. It will have a positive impact on climate change as well as on agriculture. Sustainable agriculture की तरफ हमारे बढ़ते कदम का एक हिस्सा बन सकता है. Livestock sector contributes greatest amount of carbon emissions, as I've told you only recently in the beginning of the session. You will have to make sure that there is an impact, a crucial impact with respect to the finding of sustainable solutions to that problem also. Mist irrigation and misting is basically one of the ways that you can reduce the temperatures, reduce the greenhouse gases, the gas existent in, say for example, the stables and all the barns and yards where you bind your cattle at, you have your cattle being reared at, all the farms and areas. If you have misting technologies being used, it will wash off, just like carbon sequestration happens. Similarly, you can wash off the greenhouse gases, and even though these gases will get mixed up with that water, it will certainly reduce the emissions to a greater extent. Technologies like GIS, artificial intelligence, and machine learning can also be utilized, all bursting out to provide basis for a revolutionary epoch in agriculture. The second green revolution cannot focus primarily on certain crops, and that is it. It should not only be focused on enhancing productivity, it should focus on sustainability. The problems of the first green revolution should be sorted out in the second one. That should be the approach. Further, you will have to ensure biosecurity because India is susceptible to pests. Many of the pest attacks, they sometimes come from the neighboring countries as well. Very recently, there was a case. MS Swaminathan, the chairman of the National Farmers Commission, has also recommended establishing a national agricultural biosecurity program. Now, this was also suggested in the report, which probably you might have skipped on. Make sure that you note it down. You can use it in your answers. You can use it in your mains answers and the conclusion component as well, or suggestive component of your answers as well. Upgrading agricultural surplus management, how post harvest handling happens, seed, fertilizer, agrochemical quality regulation, how all of this happens. It has to be regularized, and also you will have to promote grading and standardization at procurement centers as well. In fact, because it does not happen at the procurement centers in the right manner or in a standardization on the standardized formats, it is one of the ways that farmers are actually, I would not call it defrauded, but they are exploited at the hands of procurement agents or individuals who are into the procurement business, including from the government sector. How are they exploited? Based on the word of the officer, based on this, based on just the words of the officer who's sitting there to ensure that the procurement happens in the right manner. The farmers are told that their produce is below average, their produce is not good quality. They are not given out certificates of the quality of the product. They're just being told that just to let the farmer reduce the price. So it is on the basis of the unawareness or on the basis of ill knowledge that the farmers have, the officers, they tend to exploit the farmers. And because it is not happening either from top down or bottom up, this approach is not really leading to anything. Because even if you are wanting to enhance the awareness, you will have to do it from both ends. Unless and until that happens, if it is happening only from the top end and not from bottom up approach, it is not being focused on entirely as a mission, then it will not end. This exploitation continues even today, because most of the times the procurement agencies have tie-ups with the adhyatiyas, with the commission agents, with those private individuals in sitting in the mandis who procure majority of the produce. They give money to the farmers lesser than MSP. That, if is to be targeted, if it is to be targeted, has to be targeted from both ends. Further, harvesting of rich returns crops through market integration, making sure that the local markets are connected with the national and global markets as well, so, so that it is a multi-layered system, the agriculture. It is not fragmented at the economic level. I'm not talking about the social fragmentation of land. I'm talking about the economic fragmentation of agriculture in the country. The targeted approach that was, it was also installed. The government, it's not that the government has not thought about it. The Kisan credit card scheme actually had it in its you know components to ensure that in a designated or in a notified area, if you are pursuing notified crops, if you are growing notified crops in the notified area, what does that mean? It means that the government will notify certain areas, and if you grow the certain notified crops in those notified areas, then you will get benefits out of it. Now, the government was using Kisan credit cards to basically enhance or to take the farming to the next level through this process. But Kisan credit card scheme has very less takers. Moreover, the Indian agriculture, even if the government runs any scheme, there is a problem or a hurdle of federalism that always comes in line. So you cannot have good acceptance. Number one, political acceptance is must, economic acceptance is must. So politico socio-economic acceptance of various schemes. if it was to happen, it has to happen when it is in consonance. The national level schemes should be in consonance with the state level schemes. You cannot have the state government running a separate scheme or a different scheme or a scheme altogether opposite, in the working in the opposite direction to the national level scheme. So to make sure that does not happen, you will have to have agri council or agriculture council, just like you have GST council, just like you have GST council, on lines of GST council. If you do have this cooperative federalism taken to agriculture sector as well. Now, if you use this in your conclusions, I'm assuring you will get all the score that you want. तो अगर आपने ये यूज किया तो ये सजेशन यूज करना एग्रीकल्चर काउंसिल का. ऑल राइट. नाउ इफ यू have agriculture council, then it can reduce the burden on the exchequer. Number one, increase the per rupee efficiency that is expected from agriculture, the rupee, that every single penny that the government is spending, be it at the national level or at the federal level or at the state level. Further, it will also enhance the reach out to the farmers, because now they will have an agency specialized to take care of cooperation at various levels. So if that happens, that certainly it will enhance the productivity in the nation. Now, let's move towards the NABARD's survey that I was talking about. Now, very recently, NABARD had released this All India Rural Financial Inclusion Survey. Use this data in your answers. This is really, really important data. Now, NAFIS is basically based on a sample size of 40,000 rural households, around 40,000 rural households. You can remember this part, around 40,000, then in 29 states, which is basically 48%, out of which basically 48% are agricultural households or agri-HHs. Agri-HHs, 87% of them are small and marginal farmer households. This was the sample size. Further, the survey has combined the NSSO's situation assessment survey, which used to happen. Now NSSO is NSO. So the situation assessment survey and RBI's All India ADIS, basically the All India Debt and Investment Survey. Various components and strengths of NSO's SAS and RBI's ADIS, they have been combined, and the survey estimates 2015-16 farmers' income levels. The data comes off late because of compilation and various other calculations. You can use this data even right now. Now, what are the significant findings? Number one, with respect to the doubling of farmers' income, the vision had no assessment of the base aggregate income levels. The estimates from NAFIS fill that gap. So, when you are hoping to double the farmer's income, you will have to have some base knowledge, some base. The base year was supposed to be 2015, 2016. Some people were discussing the base year to be the first green revolution. Now, the aggregate level of incomes and the estimates from NAFIS have been utilized to bridge the gaps to increase or enhance the assessment of doubling of farmers' income. Further, benchmark income levels, the Ashok Dalwai Committee, which was set up in 2016 to advise on the strategy to double the farmers' income by 2022, did not have any benchmark levels for income from 2015-2016. So these are the challenges that you should use in your mains examination, that along, many students, they will end up just writing about doubling of the farmer's income. But if you quote this point there, then it will be a holistic answer. Just a slight addition of, the 2016 Dalwai Committee, which, had basically had been set up to advise on strategy, and it did not have any benchmark income levels for 2015-2016. So the committee derived them by applying yearly growth rates. For example, this term CAGR is used, compounded annual growth rate. So yearly growth rates of state-wise net state domestic product was used to NSSO's estimates of 2012 and 13 income levels. So it is basically the 2012-13 income levels that were used by NSSO, now NSO. Now, in terms of the sources of income, NAFIS has offered interesting insights, particularly for the Ashok Dalwai committee, and the committee can utilize those resources, those data to enhance its estimates and assessments. As far as agri and non-agri incomes are concerned, non-agricultural incomes are concerned, NAFIS has estimated that in 2015-2016, 35% of the farmers' income came from cultivation. 8%, very important guys, comes from livestock. 50% of the wages and salaries, basically wages and salaries that they get if they are working, 7% coming from non-farm sectors. Mark this very important, because it is not just a farmer, it is the household of the farmer. It is the household. So survey has also estimated that non-agri rural households, the monthly income is around 7,269, more than half of which comes from working as wage laborers. Wage laborers. That means that farming alone cannot help the farmers survive. So NAFIS data finds that working as laborers is the fallback options for the farmers in the drought years or in drought situations. Further, increasing pressure on the exchequer and increasing pressure as a result of shrinking of average landholding size has also forced them to become laborers, unskilled ones. So they don't get they don't get paid too much. They are only paid the basic minimum collector rates. How does this survey differ from other surveys? Now, even though this is not too relevant for your mains examination, but you should still know what is the difference. NSSOs has used wider definition of rural areas. This is erstwhile because it is talking about 2015 data. Now it is NSO. NABARD survey includes areas that are bigger, including tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 towns as well. The sample size is bigger. NAFIS estimates that an average Indian farming household earns, earnings they are learnt on the basis of household level data. At 5,000 rupees, it is a higher threshold level of income from farming sector as compared to NSSO's level of 3,000. So NSSO used to give a threshold of 3,000, but NAFIS has used 5,000 as the threshold. Based on that, income levels are measured. All right. As far as the data is concerned, if NAFIS followed NSSO's definitions, in 2015-2016, farmers' income could have been somewhat lower, but and it would have been at its growth would have been less than 3.7%. It is a far better estimate, so you should use this data, whatever we have discussed in the last couple of minutes. Let's move further. What should be the way forward? All three surveys, be it NAFIS, be it NSO, be it Dalwai Committee, they are conducted on in years of deficit rainfall, when you have lesser rainfall. So there is a debate over reliability of these surveys. So what you can do, you can ensure that the next survey belongs to normal rainfall years as well. So to have a comparative analysis in a much better way. To achieve doubling of the farmers' income by 2023, basically, which is almost getting over now, we are halfway through. The Dalwai committee points out that the real incomes of the farmers need to grow at 10.4% per annum, 2.8 to 3 times the growth rate that already exists, which is 3.7%. That is the problem. So this, of course, is a sound challenge. And because of the fact that the GDP will have to grow 7.2% to 20% annually, that does not really happen. And if it happens, then only you can ensure that. So the farmer's income can possibly be done by 2030, maybe, unless the government undertakes drastic steps to augment the incomes at a faster pace. So it is now seemingly doable by 2030, given that all the on paper policies are implemented in the right manner. Let's move towards the next topic, a very important topic with respect to mains examination. Every other year, I have seen multiple questions associated with sugarcane production, sugar production in mains, in prelims as well. So we will focus on this now. All right? Just a second, guys. Just a second. Sugar production in India. India is world's second largest exporter of sugar. Note this down. Generally, as UPSC aspirants, what happens is we tend to ignore certain things. Many a times we don't focus on these aspects, on who's the second largest exporter or the largest exporter, who's the largest producer, largest consumer. These are the things that generally people tend to focus on when they're pursuing SSC or any other examination. But I would recommend that at least for the predominant sectors, you should know who's the largest exporter, largest producer. India has emerged as world's largest producer and consumer of sugar. We are the second largest exporters. Now we are the second largest exporters. Hopefully, we would in the upcoming years or maybe a decade or so reach the largest exporter stage as well, because it will only help and enhance the farmers and income generation within the country. So the sugar season of last year, 2021-2022, October to September, recorded more than 5,000 lakh metric tons LMTs of sugarcane that was produced in the country. With this, India has emerged as the world's largest producer and consumer of sugar as well. We will have to check कि India का rank कितना है diabetes के अंदर. Now, apart from that, second largest exporter of sugar, Maharashtra, highest sugar exporter in the country, the state of Maharashtra. 2021-2022 sugar season exported almost 60% of total exports in India. They were coming from this sugar season. Then what are the factors that have led to the largest producer, India being the largest producer? Number one, in sync efforts and collaborative efforts of central governments and state governments. Only a couple of minutes back, I had told you that for that to happen, you will have to realize a more cooperative federalism in the agriculture sector. Wherever it has happened, it has given results. For example, the sugarcane sector. The 2021-2022 season, sugar mills procured sugarcane which was worth around 1.18 lakh, more than, with no financial assistance or subsidy from the government. 95% of the cane dues have already been cleared, which means lesser problems of credit or NPAs, etc. 2020-2021, the last year, more than 99% of the cane dues are cleared. So almost the entire cane dues, sugar cane dues have been cleared. The farmers, they are getting their money from the mills, and also the government side is cleared, almost cleared. There is a scheme called SIFASU, scheme for extending financial assistance to sugar undertakings, or SIFASU, and national policy on biofuels. These are the two government initiatives that are working towards enhancing and supporting sugarcane production and sugar industry in the country. For example, ethanol production. Ethanol is something that the government has been focusing on, particularly from biofuel sector. So bioethanol is something that the government is working on or enhancing the production itself. Now, the growth of ethanol as biofuel in the last 5 years has been amply supported by sugarcane sector or sugar sector, because we are creating bioethanol particularly predominantly from primary sources. Now, primary sources of biofuel, they are not as climate friendly as the secondary, tertiary, or quaternary sources. So we will have to move past this. But still, it has helped sugar industry. It has improved the incomes for the farmers, faster payments of all the dues, reduced working capital requirement, lesser blockage of funds due to less surplus, sugar with the mills, and more in the market, more exports has enhanced the income. Further, ethanol production capacity from molasses, sugar-based distilleries has increased to 605 crore liters per annum. Is huge. Progress is positive. It is still continuing. We are trying to meet the targets of 20% blending by 2025. EBP, ethanol blending with petrol program, EBP. Now, ethanol blended petrol, actually, the decision whether the fuel is the right choice or not is based on a lot of factors: smoke point, fire point, calorific value, and various other parameters in science or in chemistry that you study. Ethanol is the closest relative for petrol, and that is why ethanol is added. It has reduced carbon emissions comparatively. It has almost the similar fire point as well, almost the similar, and it has a lesser smoke point. It does not smoke a lot, and that also reduces the carbon emissions. Further, it is easier to blend. It's not like when you mix ethanol with petrol, they will not transform themselves into two layers. Ethanol blending with petrol is possible because ethanol actually is a very good solvent for petrol. So it only dilutes the petrol and nothing else. Otherwise, if the engines were to be considered, there would have been, there would have been a requirement of changing the car engines, or car manufacturing industry would have been going through the biggest challenge of them all, changing the type of engines that they were producing. But that is not the case because ethanol blending does not require that. Further, as far as coming back to the sugar production, sugarcane production, and sugar exports, now diversion of sugars to ethanol sector is expected to increase. Right now, it is around 35 LMT to around 50 LMT, which will generate extra revenues to the tune of around 25,000 crore rupees for the sugar mills. And that money can actually percolate to sugarcane farmers. So, as far as sugarcane production is concerned, the temperature required, the rainfall, the soil type, and further top sugarcane producing states all have been mentioned here in the notes. You should make sure that everything that has been mentioned in the description of this video session, you follow those links and be a part of the Telegram channel, be a part of the Telegram channel of Sriram's IAS as well, and make sure that you follow me on Unacademy and follow all the entire series. This series, guys, is brought to you by Sriram's IAS, and the efforts are being laid down by me, Sanat sir, and Anshum sir. So he is handling certain subjects, I am handling certain subjects. Every Saturday, every Sunday, one of us is going to come, and we are going to come to you for 2.5 hours. We will bring to you important current affairs from different subjects' perspectives for mains examination for this year. This is our mission mains. This is our mission mains 2023. This is our efforts and our support for you guys when you are pursuing your main streams. Top sugarcane producing states: Maharashtra, UP, Karnataka. Now it is basically sugarcane is the main source for sugar, good, or which is jaggery, khandsari, and even molasses. Khandsari is basically the unrefined or the natural and organic sugar that is produced from sugarcane. It has some impurities that are to be sifted out, but can be utilized, and it is utilized at various levels. Further, molasses can also be used in various other industries. Moving towards the pricing policy of sugarcane. Pricing policy for sugarcane is governed by a statutory provision. That statutory provision is Sugarcane Control Order of 1966. This order has been issued under the Essential Commodities Act of 1955. यू वुड हैव थॉट कि सर ऑर्डर बोल रहे हैं फिर स्टैट्यूटरी बोल रहे हैं, सर को पता नहीं है क्या? ऐसा नहीं है. The order has come up under the Essential Commodities Act of 1955. That is why we say that it is covered by a statutory provision of Essential Commodities Act. You should remember this. Can be useful in prelims, but it is certainly going to enhance your score in mains. Now, before 2009-2010 sugar season, the central government was fixing the statutory minimum price, or SMP, for sugarcane, and farmers were entitled to share profits of a sugar mill on a 50-50% basis. So 50% money or 50% profit that the sugar mills were producing, that was given to the farmers. But because the industry or the sugar mills, they can always change, they can always show that they are not getting that many profits, so the share that was reaching the farmers was very minimal. This sharing remains virtually unimplemented, and that is why the sugarcane control order of 1966 was amended in 2009, and the concept of SMP, this concept of SMP was replaced by FRP of sugarcane, the fair and remunerative pricing in sugarcane sector. Now, a new clause has been added there, that a reasonable margins for growers of sugarcane on account of risk and profits. This has been not interested, inserted as an additional factor for working out the FRP and calculations, etc. According to CACP, which is actually the agency that suggests what should be the FRP, the it is required to pay due regard to the statutory factors that have been listed in the control order. So, what are the statutory factors? Number one, the cost of production of sugarcane. Cost of production, basically the A2 costs, the FL costs, the C2 costs. Then the return to, these are the factors that you will have to consider. That does not mean that you will have to include them in your calculations. All right. Could you just give me a couple of seconds? Just a couple of seconds. Ensure that everything is working fine at your end. And also make sure that you mention it in the chat section. Please mention it in the chat section if everything is working fine at your end. Now, yeah, let's proceed further. I think it is working fine. Let's continue. Yep, working perfectly fine. Hi, Abhinay. Now, availability of sugar to the consumers at a fair price. If you notice, the problem with respect to agriculture is multi-pronged. It is not just about ensuring the income of the farmers, it is also to make sure that all the consumers of the agri produce, they also have access to affordable food products. Affordability and of course accessibility is a major challenge, and while ensuring the income security for the farmers. So availability of sugar to the consumers at a fair price, not too high a price. Further, the price of sugar itself in India and the international markets. Recovery rate of sugar from sugarcane, how sugar rich the sugarcane is. Also based on that, the realization made from the sale of byproducts like the molasses, the bagasse, the press mud, and their imputed value. This was inserted later on in 2008. It was amended further, and the reasonable margins for growers of sugarcane on account of risk and profits, which was inserted in 2009. States also announce a price which is called the state advisory prices, which is is SAP. It is generally higher than the SMP or the FRP generally. Why? Because, of course, politics. Further, let's realize how Maharashtra became the largest producer as well. Let's realize the case study of Maharashtra. Let's understand what is Maharashtra doing the right. There is one thing that the Maharashtra has recently done in 2019-2020 crushing season. Maharashtra Sugar Commissioner had introduced two crucial changes. Both of them are expected to change the way the industry functions. One of the ways is the harvesting and transportation charges on sugarcane. Now, while the millers, the ones who are running the sugar mills, they have expressed strong reservations about these changes. Some of them feel that the move will help streamline the payment system for the farmers as well. What are the changes? Number one, the farmers can transport their own sugarcane on their own. Second, mills have to make harvesting and transportation costs public. Whatever money that they are spending for harvesting purposes and for transportation purposes, that has to be made public so that there are no discrepancies there. Further, these HNT charges, starting the season, the commissioner, the sugar commissionerate, they have asked to publish this particular data from every individual sugar mill in the area, Maharashtra particularly. The list will have the FRP net after deducting the HNT of individual mills, and it will, which in real cane payment received by the farmers after selling their produce to the mills. The real payment of giving away their sugarcane produce to the mills, it is basically minus the harvesting and transportation charges. That generally what happens is when sugarcane is produced, it is harvested and transported at the behest of sugar mills, and because of that reason, because not every farmer has that accessibility of transportation, because of that reason, that money is generally deducted from the money that is paid to the farmers. To get the real payment that is received by the farmers, you will have to remove these charges that the mills charge as such. The farmers will also be allowed to harvest and transport their own cane, which of course is going to reduce the burden on the mills. One, if they are doing things in the right manner. Number two, it will also ensure greater access to funds with respect to the farmers. So it is a win-win situation for both the farmers and the mills, unless and until you are into malpractices. Now, unlike their counterparts in UP, mills in Maharashtra, they arrange for harvesting and transportation of cane farmers' fields till the mill gate. This does not happen in UP. This happens only in Maharashtra. So based on the date of planting of cane, mills draw up their harvesting calendar, and on that basis, trying to maximize their operations. And this has worked well for Maharashtra, if you notice, because of this reason, the productivity in the state has gone so up that it is now the leading producer of the country for sugarcane, and or rather for sugars. Now, in lieu of the service, the mills, they deduct HNT charges from the final payments that are given to the farmers. So that is something. If we are to streamline this, they have to make this charges public. If they are exorbitant, then certainly we have to work around that. So the new system will work in favor of both the millers and the farmers. I've talked about the benefits. The farmers don't have to bother about transportation. One, the mills they are ensured quality harvested material for their operation, so their operation is also streamlined. Harvesting is done by migrant workers who travel to the mills for working. तो वो मिल से उनको काम मिलता है, तो वो हार्वेस्टिंग करते हैं, फार्मर अपना प्रोड्यूस करके मैनेज करके छोड़ देता है, उसके बाद मिल्स उसको टेक अप कर लेते हैं. वन ऑफ द मेन रीजंस व्हाई महाराष्ट्र शुगर रिकवरी इज हायर देन यूपी इज बिकॉज द मिल्स arrange for harvesting and transportation of cane. Farmers के हैंड पर नहीं छोड़ा जाता. But there are certain disadvantages of this new system. Let's understand the disadvantages. Number one, the decision of the mill to levy average HNT charges may be advantageous to some farmers, but it works out against for other farmers because they have to pay out monies from the payment that they receive. On an average, mills procure cane from within a radius of 50 to 60 kilometers around them. इससे ज़्यादा नहीं. For farmers whose fields are further away from the mills, transportation of the cane is an advantage, but not so much for the farms closer to the mills, which can transport the cane and save H&T charges. So now, since the independence is given to the farmers to share that produce with the mills on their own as well, so this might be a positive impact. Otherwise, H&T charges for mills in Solapur, Ahmednagar district, Nashik district, Marathwada district, all of them, they account for around 40% of the state's total sugar production, which have started charging HNT charges in the range of 800 to 900 rupees per ton. Tonnage के हिसाब से होता है. This is a substantial amount of the total earnings for the farmers. इस वजह से farmers को थोड़ा dent भी महसूस होता है because of H&T charges. But the farmers have alleged that the millers are inflating the charges, going out of their way to favor relatives, friends, and supporters of mill directors whose fields are located further away, and the real farmer or the common man is not being benefited. So, Sugar Commissioner has taken a certain steps, and mills are apprehensive of those steps. The commissioner has decided to make these charges public and also allow farmers to harvest and transport on their own. So this has, although some are hopeful, some are not. H&T charges making them public will help farmers choose which mill to sell their cane to. उसे पता चल जाएगा कि मैं अपनी केन को कहाँ लेकर जा सकता हूँ और जब इंडिपेंडेंस होगी. So this move will help build up pressure on the mills to streamline their H&T charges. Then there might be oligopoly. There can be a challenge of oligopoly. Right? That can also be a challenge. But millers, they have said that the process will help operational hurdles, express doubts with respect to farmers' ability to arrange for harvesters and harvesting and transportation of the cane. So since the farmers don't have access to money and access to spending capital or money, that has been a major challenge. So would that allow for seamless transmission of the raw materials to sugar mills or not? That is something that we'll have to see. Now, the mills, they fear that this will eventually affect the sugar recovery of mills. That is why the current system is probably going to backfire. This is something that the mills have been saying. But in real sense, it is certainly going to have a positive impact on the rights of the farmers and also ensure a certain amount of independence for the farmers to choose between various mills. Now, this would encourage ethanol under priority sector lending scheme, moving towards the ethanol component of sugar production. Now, if under priority sector lending scheme you include ethanol production, that will certainly enhance and encourage sugar mills to invest in adding distillery capacities and basically diversify. They can get loans for this at 2 to 3% less than the existing market rates. Center has planned to augment ethanol storage facilities as well, and sugar mills, they could raise output without worrying about the storage and transportation. Storage facilities are being planned by the central government. Ministry has also sought, assurance from the mills that they would produce enough of ethanol to fulfill 5% EBP. The target is 20. We are sitting at 5. Government rules mandate 5% blending as a must, and this has been there for more than a decade, but target has never been met due to disagreement over the prices of oil marketing companies that would, that they would have to pay to the millers, because they are procuring, the oil marketing companies are to procure ethanol for blending purposes from the millers, and the millers are charging exorbitant money. Production of ethanol from sugar distilleries is the second biggest pollutant of Ganga. Because of these reasons, there are problems and challenges of EBP program as well. Petroleum Ministry is to ensure that ethanol production is brought under priority sector lending by the banks. If it happens, then there will be more investments and certainly help the cause move further. 5% blending is not enough. 20% is required. Moving further to the to the aspects where we are focused on energy demands. Note down this data. This is highly relevant data. About 98% of the fuel requirement in road transportation is which is currently met by fossil fuel sector. The remaining 2% is coming from biofuels. The National Biofuel Policy of 2018 has an indicative target of 20% ethanol blending by 2025. Only 1.5 or 2 years left to 2025, right? So that is a distant dream right now, given that we are not even achieving 5% blending. Achieving energy security can, on the basis of low carbon economy, is really critical for a growing nation like India. Blending locally produced ethanol with petrol, it will also enhance the energy security and improve the cottage industries, farmers, their participation towards energy economy that will be increased. Vehicular emission will be reduced. Ethanol blending can reduce CO2 emissions to a significant amount. Inefficient land and water usage for ethanol extraction is a major challenge. Food security is a major challenge given that you are utilizing food crops for producing ethanol, bioethanol. That is a major challenge. Further, what do we understand by ethanol blending? Just a basic, simple aspect. So, ethanol in is an agricultural byproduct. So, you process sugarcane, you get sugar. You process sugar, you get ethanol. Now, there are multiple sources like rice husk, like maize. If you are producing ethanol from secondary sources, then it becomes secondary bioethanol. So, you have primary ethanol, you have secondary, you have tertiary, and you have quaternary. These are three different sources of ethanol basically, and based on being food crops, primary, agricultural wastes, secondary, and then non-agricultural products, tertiary, and finally algae, quaternary. So basically, tertiary and quaternary sources are to be picked up on, or they are to be mainstream. They are not yet mainstream. They are only a matter of research. R&D चल रहा है बस. Ethanol makes up around 10% of petrol currently that we use in our vehicles. The original target was to raise this ratio to 20% by 2030. And this was a deadline that was pushed back to 2025 when Niti Aayog had released the ethanol roadmap for 2021. This was basically reduced. 2030 target था, 2025 कर दिया. What is the significance of ethanol blending? It is going to certainly reduce the net import of petroleum, which is around 185 million tons in 2020-2021. You can help reduce the burden on the exchequer in this segment. Further, most of the petroleum is used by vehicles, and therefore a successful 20% is also going to save the country $4 billion every single year. $4 billion can be invested in certain areas, can be utilized in more different ways than you can imagine. The renewable ethanol content is actually is expected to result in a net reduction of CO2 emissions and CO emissions and hydrocarbons emissions. So carbon emissions को कम करेगा. Ethanol itself is a cleaner fuel. It will help bring down our share of oil imports. 5% blending itself can result in a replacement of 1.8 million barrels of crude oil being imported into India. So it can certainly help in a lot of ways. 105 crore liters can reduce the crude oil requirement by 1.8 million barrels. Of course, it is relevant, right? But there are certain challenges with respect to ethanol blending. Some of them we have already discussed. For example, shifting towards sugarcane production. So you have to make sure that, because around 1/10 of the existing net zone area will have to be diverted to sugarcane production or non-food grain crops. It's certainly going to create a stress on other crops. It will increase the food prices because of the availability of food prices or food grains will reduce itself, है ना? So indication that more sugarcane is being grown. We have seen that. We have seen the fact that sugarcane production is increased, and that the government of India is encouraged more corn production through the India Maize Summit of May 2022. But still, you are utilizing agricultural tracts which are needed for food security. If you are moving away from food production and moving towards energy production from the agriculture sector, it will pose problems. And storage constraints are there. Annual capacity required, biorefineries that is required at the biorefineries level. The annual capacity is stipulated at around 300 to 400 million liters, which is still not enough with respect to 5% blending. अब 20% के लिए क्या करेंगे? Storage is going to be a main concern. For if you are to implement 10% blending, supply has to continually increase. And the supply has to keep in mind that the fact that you are moving towards E20, 20% blending, storage would have to be separate, which then raises costs. खर्चा बढ़ जाएगा, right? For 10% blending, 90% of petrol is mixed with ethanol, 10%, 80% is mixed with 20% ethanol in case of E20 or 20% blending. Simple question, है ना? So food insecurity will increase given that you will have more and more land being transferred for sugarcane production. We as a community have to realize this, that petrol tank cannot appear on dinner plate in animal fodder and be stored in warehouses or be exported. You cannot replace the dinner plate that you have with a petrol tank. India may not find it very easy to simultaneously focus on food supply systems and maintain export markets for grains. When you export or rather divert grain towards ethanol production, अगर ये होता है तो मुश्किलें बढ़ेंगी, कम नहीं होंगी. All right. So for that reason, you will have to realize this. Cool. So multiple aspects have been focused on by governments as well. Restriction on interstate movement of ethanol due to non-implementation of amended provisions of Industries Development and Regulation Act of 1951 by all the states has been a major challenge. Because of that, there have been many restrictions. A smooth transition or a smooth transportation is not possible. Ethanol blending has not been taken up in northeastern states. So why? Because of non-availability of feedstock and basic industries, वो वहां पर है नहीं. तो आप कैसे एक नेशनल लेवल, पैन इंडिया लेवल पर किस तरीके से इसको डेवलप करेंगे, दैट इज स्टिल टू बी सीन. No reduction in emission of nitrous oxides because ethanol burns more completely than petrol. It avoids emissions of carbon monoxide, but there is no reduction in nitrous oxides, which are the major environmental pollutants. How do you make sure that it happens? So there are certain initiatives that the government has brought up for ethanol blending per se. For example, the National Biofuel Policy of 2018, the E100 pilot project, Pradhan Mantri G1 Yojana of 2019, and repurposing used cooking oil, RUCO. All these initiatives have led towards an enhanced ethanol blending program or promotion of ethanol blending in India. All right, just a second. Just a second, guys. Yep, got it. Now, what should be the way forward? You will have to ensure uniform availability of ethanol blending. That should also happen at pan India level, not just in the mainland India. It should also be a part of the northeastern states and various other parts of the country. Promoting advanced biofuels, the second generation, the third generation, fourth generation biofuels are the advanced biofuels. You will have to make sure that non-food feedstock is being used for production of ethanol so that it does not create a trade-off between food production systems and ethanol production. Further, you will have to ensure supply enrichment. The supply side component of ethanol production has to be augmented. So you'll have to encourage augmentation of biorefineries, their capacities have to be increased, and various other aspects. Further, single window clearance of projects associated with production of bioethanol, setting a floor price for ethanol, just like MSPs, for example. Further, balance between food security and ethanol blending should be created. Special efforts have to be made to increase investments and attract investors for the northeastern state. है ना? चलो. But there are certain drawbacks as well. It's not free from drawbacks. What are the drawbacks? Let's discuss that. If I'm audible and visible, please let me know in the chat section. If everything is working fine, Dia, Shivasaktival, and Abhinay, everyone and every other individual, please let me know in the chat section if I'm audible and visible and everything is working fine. तो एक बार please बता दीजिएगा मुझे. Also, by the time you tell me that, if you can just hear me out what I have to say with respect to the fact that you should you should go and check out all the courses that are being offered at Sriram's IAS initiatives being brought to you on Unacademy platform. Make sure that you are a part of all these efforts that we are bringing to you guys. There are multiple lectures, multiple sessions, free live classes, and of course courses. The foundation batch, which is a comprehensive batch for UPSC CSE 2024 preparation. Go and check out the sessions, the demo lectures there. Check out the comprehensive batches on sociology. I take your public administration on Unacademy platform. And apart from that, welcome Deep Shikhaji. Welcome to the class. And apart from that, PSIR optional, economics, history optional, all these courses, you should go through them. Make sure that you are a part of this mission 1 year for UPSC CSE 2024, that we are bringing for you guys a comprehensive coverage of all the syllabus, the entire syllabus for prelims, mains, interviews. Everything is being covered in a structured manner. Now, this is a part of that. This is your mission mains. We are running this mission and we are running towards this mission of mission mains 2023. पहली क्लास में ही अंशुम सर ने आपको बताया था. I am repeating the same stuff. And also make sure that you attend all these sessions that happen on Saturdays and Sundays at the same time at 10 a.m. for 2.5 hours, 2.5 ghante. We study important and relevant current affairs from the perspective of mains. Now, moving forward. Now, on an average, 1 ton of sugarcane can effectively produce 70 liters of ethanol, which requires 2,860 liters of water for production, which means that ethanol production can be, improving sustainability, but that does not ensure that the process itself is sustainable. It does not reduce key pollutants like the nitrous oxides. That creates a challenge. So it may show some negative impact on food and fodder because of diversification of various resources for ethanol production. To avoid that, we'll have to make sure that the production of ethanol is further studied upon, further researched upon. Moving ahead, the impact on environment, we have discussed this. Let's move forward. Now, there was an expert committee which was sat down with respect to production of ethanol and ethanol blending program. The report of this interministerial meeting, it says that 20% blending is viable. It is possible. The By blending 20% ethanol by 2025, in the next 2 odd years, the nation can experience benefits including savings around 30,000 crore rupees in foreign exchange, energy security, reduced carbon emissions, improved air quality, and a lot of other stuff. Something that we have already discussed. So there is a report of the expert committee as well, which is basically an interministerial, sitting. And further, what should be done? There should be, removal of uncertainty about the future production. A pan-India focus should be there. Refocus on ethanol blending or ethanol production from waste should happen, and it is a great opportunity to become a global leader in sustainable practices, particularly sustainable biofuel policy. We can actually make a name out of ourselves. Further, moving towards the next topic, and that is status report on India's external debt 2021-2022. Very recently, this report was released last year. I think it was around September last year, and the data was up till March 2022. The External Debt Management Unit, EDMU, Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, released the 28th edition of the status report on India's external debt. Now, if you remember, it was way back in 2016. In 2016, there was a question to, in prelims with respect to debt to GDP ratio. Now, debt to GDP ratio, India has around somewhere around 83% of debt to GDP ratio. It is all doable. It's not that India is not able to pay off the loans, or it's not that it is a burden on the exchequer. This is the first liability that the government pays as soon as the budget comes out. So we are not those individuals. We are not European Union. We are not, countries like Spain, Italy, Greece, for example. We pay out our loans in time. Our EMIs go in time. And in fact, even while the 1990 crisis was coming up, was brewing up, we never really did actually default. We never really did default. Yes, there were chances of default, but we were taking measures. We could have avoided it. But yes, that is what the history is about our 1991 LPG reforms. But this report is going to help you write good answers with respect to the India's economy. Also, you will be able to use it in your essays component and maybe your optional subject as well. How to use this? Let's first talk about it. The one thing is to be understood that India has a negative IRGD. That means we possess debt sustainability. Negative IRGD means interest rate growth differential. Interest rate growth differential is basically the difference between the rate of interest that the government has to pay, or any individual rather has to pay. This is just a common term. And of course, the growth that the government is getting. So if you subtract that, it tells you more negative this IRGD is, more sustainable your debt is. That means you will have more and more leverage to pay out your loans. That means you are growing more than that you are liable for. For example, if you are liable to repay 110 rupees this year, and you are growing at a pace of, you were 100 last year, you are growing at a pace of 15%. That means 10% is the rate of interest, 15% is the growth rate. You are minus 5% in IRGD. That means you will have more money than you have to repay. That ensures sustainability, because you will further enhance growth the next year, and you will be able to repay the loans in a far more possible manner, in a far more accessible manner the next year and the years to come, if you keep ensuring that your IRGD remains in the negative domain. That ensures debt sustainability. Now, many students, they think that 83% of debt to GDP ratio is a huge figure. It is actually not. It is actually not if you compare it with other nations. Like, for example, if you compare it with the United States, if you compare it with the European Union, various states that are part of European Union, China, for example, if you are working on that, as far as the absolute figures are concerned and also the ratios are concerned, India is in a fairly, I would say, comfortable spot in that regard, right? Just a second. Guys, make sure that you're a part of all the Telegram groups and channels that Unacademy UPSC Articulate channel shares the link of. If you go in the description, you will find multiple links. Follow each and every link. Be a part of the initiatives that Sriram IAS is bringing to you guys. Make sure that you are a part of the Telegram channel. You will have access to n number of information and huge load of sessions that we at Sriram IAS we have been delivering on an academy platform. You will get access to that as well. Do not skip on that. Please make sure that you are going through all of that. All right. Now, So, status of India's external debt. This report from last year. This has relevance for your mains examination. There can be a direct question with respect to external debt in your mains examination as well. The External Debt Management Unit brings to you this, from DEA, Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, has released this 28th edition. India's external debt stands at US dollar 620.7 billion, and this was as of end March 2022. This grew by 2%. Earlier on, it was 573.7 billion. ये याद ना भी रखें तो चलेगा, ये याद रख लीजिएगा, ये याद रख लीजिएगा. This is going to be relevant. A 2% of it was denominated in US dollars. Indian rupees denominated debt estimated at 31.2%, which was the second largest. Okay, component wise, second largest was Indian rupee denominated debt, which was around 31.2%. So the external debt to GDP ratio was has fell marginally to 19.9%. Earlier on, it was 21.2% a year ago. It has declined, but that decline is not too significant because it is a ratio, because the Indian economy has also grown. Foreign currency reserves as a ratio to external debt, they stood slightly lower. Even the reserves, the foreign currency reserves, they were lower. Why? Because rupee was fluctuating a lot against the dollar, and RBI utilized these reserves to make sure that there was a sort of, to a certain extent, stability in the rupee segment, in the in the exchange rate segment. Now, foreign currency reserves as a ratio to external debt, they stood slightly lower at around 97.8% as compared to 100.6% last year. Foreign currency reserves have gone down, which means the external debt, if it was 100 rupees, we only have 97.8 rupees to repay that as of March end 2022, last year, basically. Commercial borrowings, NRI deposits, short-term trade credit. Short-term trade credit is based on the fact that if you are sending, say, goods, if you are an exporter, the money that you are to receive from the importer from other country, if it is not received in 90 days, then it becomes basically a trade credit, and RBI treats it as such in the balance of payment manual that it has to share with IMF as well. As of March 2022, the sovereign external debt amounted to the US dollars 130.7 billion, increasing around 17% over the last year, which means that allocation of SDRs has basically, it has had its impact. So based on the sovereign, your sovereign external debt, the data that you have received, the special drawing rights that you have with IMF, because you have enhanced your borrowings, it has increased the sovereign external debt by 17.1%. Special drawing rights have risen from to around 23 billion US dollars from earlier 5.5 billion US dollars, almost quadrupled in 1 year, which means that you will have more access, and because you had more access, you actually had more access, and based on that, you basically enhanced your external debt. The foreign portfolio holdings of government securities, on the other hand, it has slid down to 19.5 billion US dollars from 20.4. Almost $1 billion decline has been seen in this segment. Non-sovereign external debt is estimated at 490.0 billion US dollars, which has posted a growth of 6.1% over the last 1 year. Cool. So, having understood that, let's move forward towards the next topic, and that is an important report from a standing committee, and that report is on groundwater, a valuable but a diminishing resource. Just a second, guys. Make sure that you are a part of all the initiatives. This is not a one-off live session. We have already had 3 live sessions on the same process in the same manner. This is the fourth session of this month. Every Saturday, every Sunday, you get access to these sessions at 10 a.m. for 2.5 hours. We cover important current affairs. I hope you mark your calendars. I hope you know this, you follow this through. Groundwater is a valuable resource, but it is still diminishing. The Standing Committee report very recently in March 2023, it came up with this report and it was tabled in the parliament. And because it was tabled in the parliament, I thought, why not we study this? Because it is related to agriculture sector, it is related to environment, it is related to economy, rural economy, it's related to multiple aspects of GS3, it is related to many aspects of GS2 as well. You can utilize it in your essays examination, use it to give reasons to your answers in interviews as well, and maybe try to cover the analysis that I am going to deliver now in your optional subjects as well, PSIR or public administration particular. So it has huge significance, this topic. Now, key observations and recommendations of the committee, they include: number one, they said that you have to create a central body. There are multiple bodies both at the state level, at the central level, where, which have responsibility relating to water related issues. They include central ministries: Ministry of Jal Shakti, for example, Ministry of Rural Development separately, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. These are three different ministries. They are focusing on same topic of water as a resource. State departments exist separately. State and central pollution control boards are also an important body. Dedicated authorities are there. For example, the Central Groundwater Board, CGWB, and Central Groundwater Authority, CGWA. So CGWA, CGWB, these authorities, there is multiplicity of administration and there is lack of coordination. So it is not moving towards good governance. It is not moving towards minimum government, maximum governance as well. So there are challenges. The committee has observed that there is lack of coordination between all these. So if you had a centralized and nodal agency, then it will ensure cooperative federalism, that will ensure cooperative actions that been taken up with respect to the groundwater. Now, further, you need legislation. There have been laws on groundwater management have been passed in 19 states or so, and the model bill that was circulated in 1970 has been the basic premise of all the states creating those laws. But this bill model was circulated in 1970s and it was last revised in 2005. The year is going 2023. Almost 2 decades have passed. The bill has not been revamped. The committee has observed difficulties in implementing these laws. Why? Because of lack of guidelines. There are no guidelines. Sometimes the act is passed, but it is not notified. They recommend that the Department of Water Resources, River Development, Ganga Rejuvenation, they take urgent action in this regard. Further, let's talk about irrigation. What is the impact of irrigation and what is the impact on irrigation? The committee has observed that excessive dependence on groundwater irrigation is a necessity. Why? Because we are growing crop that are water intensive, for example, paddy, sugarcane. They command higher minimum support price for the same reason, because the input costs are higher. Why? Because you have to go for irrigation facilities. That is the reason, right? Further, the committee has recommended that Department of Water Resources, River Department, Ganga Rejuvenation, they have to engage with Department of Agriculture, Farmer Welfare, so that less water intensive cropping systems and cropping patterns are basically devised. This will only happen when there is a sense of integration of land resources, water resources, and the way they are perceived at a social level. Right now, the usability is being reduced for future generations for multiple reasons. right? So then there is a problem of groundwater pollution. I think we have discussed groundwater pollution when we were discussing the leaching of land and the cancerous growth of micro mixtures that are happening because of the heavy metals that are entering into the mainstream water. Then they are entering into the food chain. Bioaccumulation is happening. Because of that, many people are facing challenges with respect to health problems like cancer and whatnot. These are challenges that are posed at the end of the consumer or at the other end. Groundwater pollution is increasing. Widespread groundwater contamination is happening because of industries close by. They recommend that more funds be added to the Jal Jeevan Mission, number one, which basically tries to aim to provide households with safe drinking water. They can be allocated to areas with groundwater contamination so that they get access to clean and clear drinking water, basically. And accessibility to groundwater should be based on various premises. Further, committee has also observed a lack of sharing of data, coordination between various departments, various bodies, like state government departments, like pollution control boards, like various other agencies, including CGWA, CGWB, for example. Now, they have recommended that the proposed central government authority on groundwater, it should coordinate between all these different authorities, formulate a policy on groundwater pollution, and then move further. The committee has observed that personnel and resource shortages they hinder the state and central pollution control boards. That is a major problem. Further, they have recommended to address. The committee has recommended to address this. Further, the problem lies with, even if you have any organization, any organizational structure, unless and until you implement it in the right manner, it will not be able to help out. हमारे पास ढांचा आ जाता है, we have structures, we have administrative structures, but the implementation part is very, I would say, shady or cloudy. The committee has recommended amendment of the Water Pollution Prevention and Control Act of 1974. Acha, do one thing, just check, Water Pollution Act पहले आया था और the Air Pollution Act. Air Pollution Act. चेक करना, मुझे कमेंट्स में बताना. Okay, which came first? Was it the air pollution? Was it the water pollution? And why? Also the why component. Right? Guys, could you just give me a couple of seconds? Just a couple of seconds, please. Yep. So make sure that you answer that question. Now, further, the committee has also recommended the amendment of Water Pollution Act, Water Pollution Prevention and Control Act of 1974. Make sure that you go through and check out which act came first. Also, further, there has been less severe penalties than the outright closure of industries. There can be, making sure of the fact that pollution control boards impose monetary penalties more, so that monies can be, those monies can be used for promotion of water pollution prevention and other adaptive and mitigating properties and activities by the at the end of pollution control board. Further, you have to make sure that there are schemes and processes for groundwater recharging. Manrega scheme and Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana can be implementing projects for artificial recharge of groundwater. You can utilize Manrega funds, you can utilize Manrega labor, you can utilize Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana components to ensure groundwater is recharged. Further, you have to make sure that construction of structures designed to recharge groundwater happens. Try utilizing technologies coming from ancient India. It was very recently it was being discussed. There was, I was going through some podcast videos and I was checking out a couple of relevant material. They said that there was flash floods in the beloved country of Pakistan a couple of years back. And in those flash floods, what was seen that the entire country was facing difficulties, whereas the city of Mohenjo-daro, the cities and those ruins of Mohenjo-daros, they still had a functioning drainage system. There you did not have accumulation of water. Their drainage system was still efficient. Why don't we utilize those drainage systems? Why don't we realize those drainage systems? Maybe not from our ancient history, maybe from, say, the European systems of drainage, maybe some place where drainage systems are far better. You use those technologies, you use those parameters and create a good, effective drainage system as well. And drainage system, along with ensuring the level of groundwater is being recharged using those technologies. So you can use the help from countries like Israel, for example. That can happen. Committee has recommended modification of the schemes that we have already discussed to make sure that rejuvenation of existing water bodies is possible. So there are certain schemes that you can utilize further. For example, Amrut Mission, Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, where you can utilize rejuvenation and urban transformation aspects of Atal Mission in the urban areas as well. The concrete jungles, they can also help you recharge groundwater. Further, the committee has recommended that Ministry of Jal Shakti, they has to they have to create coordinative efforts. Urban local bodies should be given more funds to maintain these water bodies. Atal Bhujal Yojana is there that you can use to provide financial assistance to state governments, local bodies, for example, gram panchayats, so that their projects relating to groundwater management, they are financed, they are possible. Further, this has to happen in a decentralized manner, not in a delegated manner, but in a decentralized manner. ओके, चलो, मैंने मैनर कैसा लिख दिया? कोई बात नहीं, छोटे छोटे शहरों में बड़ी बड़ी बातें होती रहती हैं. Further, National Water Mission, National Solar Mission, which is a part of NAPCC, National Action Plan on Climate Change, can be utilized to mitigate activities and to invest in activities that can help you mitigate climate change by replenishing groundwater. It is basically responsible for formulating strategies on conservation, efficient management, equitable distribution of water resources. The committee has observed that this has hindered this is basically hindered by lack of funds. पैसा नहीं है, autonomy नहीं है organizations के पास. Recommended that it is strengthened in this regard. If it is, then certainly it will help you get more prominence, it will help you gain more prominence. Chalo, moving further to the next report, and that is the nano fertilizer report. This will be the last topic of the day. Make sure to watch this session till the end, guys. आप end तक इस session को जरूर देखिएगा. I will share a very important piece of information to you all. Nano fertilizers can be utilized for crop production. Now, the standing committee, again, which was chaired by Shashi Tharoor, Dr. Shashi Tharoor came up with this report as a standing committee, parliamentary standing committees on chemicals and fertilizers. Its report on nanofertilizers for sustainable crop production and maintenance of soil health. This came up March this year, 2023 March. Now, the key observations and recommendations of this committee include number one, the fact that agriculture is facing challenges with respect to stagnation in crop yields. The growth is not being seen. Increase in food grain production must largely come from increase in productivity because the land is not increasing, so you'll have to increase productivity. There is very little scope of increasing area under cultivation. So you cannot just convert forests into basically food producing areas. Acha. Further, fertilizers, they provide nutrients to ensure optimal growth and productivity. But the problem is that the usage is very imbalanced. Urea alone accounts for 82% of nitrogenous fertilizers. Urea alone, which leads to major problems, including degradation of soil, including various other challenges. But what you can do is you can focus on development of nano fertilizers. IFCO has developed nano urea. Nano urea was notified by Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare as a nano fertilizer in February 2021, 2 years back. IFCO has also developed nano fertilizer technologies for other nutrients like zinc, copper, and sulfur. This is very important. Nano zinc, nano copper, and nano sulfur. ये पता होना जरूरी है, ये prelims में भी पूछ सकते हैं. Research trials on several crops have been conducted. Committee has recommended that we should expedite this process of commercial utilization of nano fertilizers. If that happens, that will only ensure a better sustainable means of farmers income, and along with that enhancing of productivity bhi achhi jayegi. Benefits of nano fertilizers, there are many. For example, as far as IFCO is concerned, the field trials, 500 ml of nano urea bottle, which is 240 rupees, it can replace, only 500 ml can replace 45 kg bag of urea, which is around 267 rupees. Further, the committee has also observed that nano urea can reduce the transportation and warehousing cost. Why? Can somebody tell me why? Simple, eh? Because now you will have to transport lesser amounts. You will have to store lesser amounts. That means better crop productivity, increased income for the farmers because the input cost will be reduced. One, it is being reduced at the quantifiable level. Another, it is being reduced at the transportation, HNT losses, and transmission and transmission and coverage losses, and etc. They will be reduced as well. Field trials have been found that the average yield is 8% higher because of nano urea. Why? Because it is not just about supplying the nutrient; it is also about the nutrient. Make sure that you note this now. Nutrient uptake capabilities. Nutrient uptake capabilities is something that we have to ensure, or this was part of my research as well when I was pursuing my master's in chemical engineering. I had pursued the same research where I had enhanced nutrient uptake using carbon nanotubes, which I had produced naturally. तो वो सस्ते में प्रोड्यूस की और फटाफट से वो न्यूट्रिएंट अपटेक भी जल्दी होगा. I had researched in uh, wheat. Wheat grain was being used and was the productivity was being checked. Productivity was also increased. However, the Department of Agriculture Research and Education, there basically Department of Agriculture Research and Education, long-term effects of nanofertilizers of various crops have cannot be drawn as research trials have completed only 1 year before this. So we are not yet fully equipped with research data, and that is one of the major problems. Guys, please make sure that you like this session as well. Please make sure that you like this session also if you have not yet done that. सेशन को लाइक जरूर कर दो. अगर अभी देखा है तो साथ के साथ कर दो, है ना? So the committee has recommended that long-term dedicated research has to happen so that benefits, side effects of nano fertilizers is known. Challenges क्या हैं? Basic तो यही challenge है. Second thing is that cost savings from nano urea will assist doubling the farmer's income. That is fine. But it must be noted that small and marginal farmers, they pose a challenge for its adoption. They are going to face difficulties while implementing this. Department has already taken several measures as village level demonstrations and panel discussions on radio to create awareness for nano urea, but still it has not reached the masses. Committee has also noted down that they will analyze the cost of agriculture sprayer, and it ranges around 1200 to 10,000 rupees per sprayer depending upon the type of sprayer that there is. अगर आप जर्मन मेड लेते हैं तो वो थोड़ा सा महंगा हो जाता है, अगर आप इंडियन मेड लेते हैं तो वो मीडियोकर होता है. Similarly, they are priced. So this is an extra burden on the, not on the exchequer, but on the farmer. So can the farmer afford this or not? तो उसके लिए आपको फार्मर कोऑपरेटिव्स को प्रमोट करना पड़ेगा. The committee recommends that ministry speed up the efforts for effective implementation of nano fertilizers being sprayed. अच्छा, agricultural drones, they cost around 10 lakh rupees, 10 lakh रुपए. And 86 to 87% of the farmers are small and marginal farmers. It is very difficult for them to actually afford any of these things. Affordability is going to be a challenge. Further, it has recommended that the department has to devise a plan to conduct regular training programs. So, training of farmers, of entrepreneurs about drone based fertilizer sprays has to be made sure. But then there are problems with respect to PM2, PM10 particles being suspended in the air itself. Although nano urea is at nanoscale, even then the conglomerations or accumulations of nano urea might lead to pollution in the air for certain period of time. All right. Further, the committee has said that allocation of funds has, they have not been allocated separate funds for nanotechnology. डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ फर्टिलाइजर्स के अंदर ज्यादा पैसा नैनोटेक के अंदर खर्च नहीं हो रहा है. मिनिस्ट्री को रिकमेंडेशन दिया है कि एक साइजेबल अमाउंट आप अपना पैसा नैनोटेक बेस्ड रिसर्च के अंदर डालें, फर्टिलाइजर इंडस्ट्री के अंदर, एंड डेवलपमेंट ऑफ वेरी types of nano fertilizers, not just nano urea, but zinc, copper, for example, the examples that I had given you a couple of seconds back. Where is it? Yeah. नैनो जिंक, नैनो कॉपर, नैनो सल्फर, इस फील्ड के अंदर भी रिसर्च को बढ़ाने की जरूरत है. फर्दर, of course, effective implementation, cheaper means for spraying nano fertilizers, drone costs of about 10 lakh, they have to be brought down. Further, imports with respect to fertilizers, with respect to urea, subsidy, which is going towards imports itself, that has to be regularized. The committee noted that urea imports, they have risen from 55 lakh metric tons in 2016-2017 to 98 lakh metric tons in 2020-2021. 26% of urea subsidy imports में चली जा रही है पैसा देने में. तो कमिटी हैज ऑब्जर्व दैट जुडिशियस एप्लीकेशन ऑफ यूरिया इज नेसेसरी. उसको अगर आप सॉइल हेल्थ कार्ड स्कीम के साथ लिंक कर देंगे तो इट विल सर्टेनली हेल्प यू गाइस आउट. So further, it is expected that if you implement this policy right, then you can save 25,000 crore rupees in subsidy every single year. हर साल आप 25,000 करोड़ रुपया बचा सकते हैं. Imagine that. All right. So the committee noted that the department has established a long-term import agreements. JVs have to be set up, and further buyback arrangements in countries which are rich in raw materials, that has to be taken care of as well. So that import aspect is also regularized. Further, committee has also noted that the public and private sector companies who want to manufacture nano urea or nano fertilizers, they must be supported by every possible means in every possible way. Department has to take up the matter with the Ministry of Finance. Performance or sorry, production linked incentive scheme, which is being criticized to a major extent. I think it was Raghuram Rajanji. He's criticized very recently the scheme that we are discussing. So even though it is being criticized, but it is a wonderful scheme which can incentivize enhanced production. Use this scheme for nano fertilizers as well to boost investment in the fertilizer industry also. All right. Now, let's call it a day right now. And just to share a very important information to you with you guys, we will continue this topic in the next class. The report has been covered. इसके बाद the next topic है, which is with respect to coal trends and problems with respect to Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliance. We will be discussing that in the next session. The next session will happen on Saturday, 10 a.m. Make sure that you mark your calendars for that. Second thing, you make sure that you are a part of mission 1 year for UPSC CSE 2024. It is a comprehensive batch where we are covering prelims, mains, and interview stages in a structured manner. All the top educators are bringing to you this. The batches are starting on 22nd of June. Make sure that you are a part of it. Make sure to like this session as well, huh? Also, further, you have 25% discount option available if you use this referral code of SRIRAMS Srirams. If you use this referral code, 25% discount on all UPSC CSE subscriptions that we are offering on Unacademy platform will be available. Further, Sriram's IAS has brought for you a foundation batch for UPSC CSE 2024. There is optional batches for public administration, particularly sociology, PSIR, economics, history optional. All you have to do is follow all the teachers on Unacademy platform. You follow me. My name is Sanadat Bhardwaj. If you follow me on Unacademy platform, then also you will gain access to all the relevant pieces of information, all the stuff that we are covering at Unacademy, everything that Sriram Zayas is bringing for you guys on Unacademy platform. You will have access to that. This is me. This is my qualifications, my name. You can search my name on Unacademy platform. My name is Sanadat Bhardwaj, and I shall see you on Saturday at 10 a.m. 2.5 hours, mains related current affairs. I'll see you guys. I hope to see you again. Make sure that you have fun today, but with with wisdom, with pure focus on current affairs. Sundays should be a day of current affairs, right? Hello, I'll see you on the other side. Take care. God bless you all. Bye bye.